quite a while ago, I promised to do a little tutorial just on sort of audio setup for doing a fan edit. As with past videos, this is somewhat specific to Davinci Resolve, which is what I use to edit, but you're still going to be able to transfer some of this over to Adobe Premiere, maybe Final Cut, at least conceptually. There will be differences in how you would do this setup on some of those systems, but at least as far as the sort of big picture, it should be pretty similar. So just to start here, I'm doing this very basic edit of Season 6 of The Expanse. There's these sort of hidden scenes that you can only access by streaming it on a computer or on specifically an Amazon Fire Stick. And so 25 minutes of the season weirdly gate kept. And so I'm actually taking that and adding it back into the season, into those episodes. So that's the long story short. But here's what I'm running into is, the main episodes are in 5.1, but these sort of expanded material is only in stereo. And so I'm actually going to just create a very basic 5.1 mix, so to speak. So as you can see, I've actually done the work on all the episodes at this point, and I'm just going to be sort of, encoding them and doing that work, which will probably take a little while, but I'm just doing this sort of demo version so that I can sort of recreate the work. What we'll start with is the audio setup for each clip. And what we're going to start with is the main episode. So we're doing episode 1 of season 6. In Davinci Resolve, I'm going to go to clip attributes. And this is what I would have seen is 5.1, and it's going to be, sort of this embedded single track that's got six audio channels in it, and I've actually already got them, they're already appropriately labeled, in the file. So it's left, right, center, LFE, which is low frequency effects, and then left surround, right surround. And you'll see what I've already got on the timeline, and I did this prior also, is I've labeled my audio tracks so that I know, just as a reminder, hey, which channel is which. Otherwise, it'll just say sort of audio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you do this long enough, you probably know which one's which, but it's just a nice little reminder. So you can go in and edit those fields and just say, or you could say L, R, C, whatever you want, but it's really just for your reference, but it can be really helpful just at a quick sort of glance which channel's which. But you will see once we get some clips in there that it is very easy to see for a lot of it what's doing what. So go back to the clip attributes. We are going to change it here to mono. I want to work with just mono tracks, and there will be a reason for this. If you're doing very little audio editing, you could really probably stick with 5.1. I just find for consistency, if I need to make changes to, the center channel or something else, instead of having to break that out or go into the separate audio mixing page, I can then do most of the work just from the edit page here. So I'm going to add 6 tracks. We've got 6 mono tracks here, and you just have to do the track assignments. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now it's not naming them anymore here because now they're just generic mono tracks, but we'll sort of get to that. We're going to show Davinci Resolve what the appropriate routing is in what they call Fairlight, which is a very strange name to have light in the name of your audio mixing component, but that always confused me when I first started working with this. So we've got our channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna put OK on that, and that's why we've got these labeled here. So when we bring this in, you are going to see, drop that, and you can sort of already see all this stuff going on here. That's your center channel. Majority of dialogue is going to live on that center channel. And then left and right are going to have music and effects and things like that. LFE is very specifically low frequency effects. So for The Expanse, it's going to be rockets, the ships taking off, or it's going to be explosions, things like that. Basically extra bass that is not specifically part of those left and right tracks. And then you've got your left surround and your right surround. And so those are going to mirror somewhat closely here, except for in maybe specific cases where there's some truly, door open behind you things happening, some actual effects or, sort of positional audio. So that's your sort of basic setup for getting this in there. And we're going to get to this second clip in just a second. But what we are also going to do is look at this Fairlight menu. And so this has bus format, bus assign, and then link group. And so for bus format, when you first get in, it's probably going to be on stereo. And that's obviously very common. You're bringing in audio. It's only got 2 channels, left and right. But what we want to do is obviously tell it, hey, we're working in, and you have all these different options, 3.0 sound, so 3 speakers, no subwoofer, 4, which would be, you could quad, or you can have these different sort of channel setups, and there's very specific reasons for, it's basically the order of these speakers in your track listing. So here's the easiest way to sort of make a mistake. And you do have to verify this with your file. How is it actually set up? Where is the audio coming in? The most common is going to be 5.1 and not 5.1 film. So 5.1 is going to be what I already have set up here, left, right, center, LFE, left surround, right surround. 5.1 film, if I recall, is left, center, right, left surround, LFE, right surround. And I could be slightly off on that arrangement, but it's less and less common. But if you do run into that, make sure you just verify the file. You'll see it, in your, in your timeline. If, if your center track is what appears on audio 2, you may have something different and you'll just need to work with that. But like I said, most common these days, if you're getting Blu-ray files and things like that, it's going to be standard 5.1. So I'm going to say okay. So now Davinci Resolve knows what I am working with. Actually, I'm going to unlink this. And this is, if you had a much more complex setup, you might actually set up 1 through 6. And then additionally, I have edits where I've set up another 7 through 12 because I have a whole second track. Maybe I'm doing music replacement. And so I'm removing sound and doing things with the main 1 through 6, but then adding a whole second mix of music, or it could be, adding sound effects or things like that. And that gives you a whole second space to sort of work with that. Just to have everything sort of stretched out. So once we'll kind of get back to this, but before you export, you need to make sure that you do link all of your tracks together as a specific group. And again, this is where you want to make sure if the audio coming in is standard 5.1 and you've told Fairlight that your bus, that your output is 5.1 through Resolve, you need to make sure that your link group is also 5.1. So again, for now, I'm going to unlink that because we can't do separate work on individual tracks while they're linked. But this is just to show you, hey, this is where that work happens. So we've got this in there. I'm not going to recreate all the work, but what I am going to do is go into this, this second clip, which is this sort of 5-minute extra scene, just this great character scene that exists for each of these episodes. And I'm going to go again into clip attributes. And you see, if I expand this down, that's it. That's all I have to work with is left and right. So I still want it to be a 6-channel setup so that I can do a little additional work with this. So I'm going to put that in as mono again, and I'm going to add 6 channels here. So we'll again select mono, and I'm going to add these channels, and it did one too many. There we go. And so here, I'm going to get a little specific of how I set things up. If you recall, we're, left, right, center, LFE, left surround, right surround. So I do want channels 1 and 2 here. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to leave this 4th channel that is LFE. I'm going to put none. And the reason for that is LFE is only low frequency effects that are additional to what's already in the main left and right. So a big explosion, they might add extra bass information. And if you were just playing on your TV speakers, it's just not going to play anything. You don't have a subwoofer attached to that. But if you have a subwoofer and that subwoofer goes all the way down to 20 hertz, you're going to get all that extra bass information. So it is very much an optional part, and I still want the track in there so it doesn't kind of cause any problems. But I'm not actually going to put any extra information. There is no any extra information. There's only 2 channels here. So left and right, whatever is there for bass information is going to get passed along to the subwoofer. There's just not going to be anything additional. So we're going to leave this blank. And then I am going to do again left and right to the rears because I do want to have just a little bit of sort of ambience, and we'll get to sort of how I set that up. So what I'm going to change here is, because I don't actually know is the, left or right, because there's no dedicated, center channel. When I'm only getting 2 channels in, there could be situations where one of them has more or less dialogue information. So I'm actually going to play it a little bit safe here. I'm going to change this third track to stereo, and I'm going to go back to channel 1, channel 2. So you can see there's, a whole lot of different versions of channel 1, channel 2. And I'm actually going to do some adjustments that fake a 5.1 surround sound without getting too crazy about it. So this is the setup I want for this clip. I'm going to now bring that in, and we'll not really worry about where it lands. And then what I'm going to do is, let's just punch in a little bit. Here, we're going to actually unlink this, and there's a reason for that. And you have to be really careful. Once you unlink this, you could move the video track around, you can move audio tracks around, and suddenly things get very disconnected. So you want to be very careful about just making sure all of your audio and all your videos stay together, so to speak. So I've got, as far as Resolve is concerned, this is 6 channels. This is a 5.1 mix. However, right now, it's basically just left, and right, nothing, and then left, right. So what I want to do is we're going to start at the top. This is specific to Davinci Resolve Studio license, so the paid pro version, which if you really want to play around some advanced stuff like this is super useful. And I think they've had it on sale for under $200, and that's effectively lifetime. You can also buy a piece of, Blackmagic gear. I bought their speed editor, which is really nice little, it's got a jog wheel and just sort of like quick buttons, and you'll get a license with that. So highly recommend if you're really into this as sort of a hobby, or maybe you do some occasional sort of pro work. Really nice to have both studio licenses, and I find the speed editor to be super handy, at least just even from ergonomics. So what I'm going to do in here is there's this new tool that came out in the last 6 months to a year called a music remixer, and it's a little misleading here because it's not so much music as you can separate all these different types of sounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mute the voice out of the left channel. I'm going to do the same thing on the right channel. And so these are now basically left, right, music and effects, and the dialogue's been pulled. And then we're going to go into that music remixer, and I am going to remove everything else from what is now my center channel. So basically all the audio information is still there. It's just now split across left, right, and center. So that's why I kept both left and right as part of this track. Even though I'm treating it as mono on the timeline, this actually includes both left and right information. So don't have to worry about LFE. It's just a blank track at this point, but there is information there. It won't mess anything up. There's just basically an entirely blank track. Now here's where I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to remove voice from the left and right surround. What I want to do is right now, these are going to come in just as strong as, the actual main left and right. So I want to lower these. This is going to be somewhat personal preference. I'm not going to do a lot of advanced mixing on these. Now, I could really try to play around with separating out, is there a moment where a door opens behind the characters or something? I'm not going to go in so meticulously and just try to actually create a surround sound mix because I don't actually have what we call the stems. I don't have the actual effects sounds. I don't have the actual, the tracks that they would have recorded or the Foley that they would have made. I literally just have left and right. So what I'm going to do instead is just lower this a lot. Maybe something like this, I would say 15 to 20 decibels would be a good, a good sort of aim for this. So let's just see where we end up. Sure, something like that. And you can see, if I look at the main mix, there are moments where it might be a little bit louder. This is, probably, theme music or, some song moments. Maybe this is that probably music too? Yep, looks like that's probably music. So there's, those moments where there's music, it's probably a little louder. But then you can see when there's just dialogue, it's really probably just some ambient sounds. And that's sort of what I'm chasing, is not really to have the music be as significant in the mix. It's mostly just like have a little ambient sound. It's going to mirror the left and right placement. So it's not going to be super distracting. But what I don't want is for you to hear too much out of your rear speakers. It's basically just to have the information there, have it pretty low in the mix, and just give the impression that there is a 5.1 mix. So the majority is really going to be coming out of those front speakers. You can kind of see, we now have basically a pretty decent starting point for this surround mix. You can maybe even see right here, hey, we got all this audio coming in. And so the reason we're leaving these all unlinked is you can't make these music remixer changes to a 5.1 track or to linked tracks. It has to be an individual track. So this got us where we wanted. Obviously, if we open up the actual file I worked with, I trimmed a little at the front, trimmed a little here, did some transition between them, and then I've got basically effectively the same mix there. So that got us to where we wanted. Now, if we're ready to export, this is where I would go in and say, hey, okay, let's link these together. We're going to link as a 5.1. And then when you go to your export page, now you can tell it, hey, I want to export. I would highly recommend out of Resolve, if you are on Windows, you really need to go out as linear PCM. AAC is very limited for the Windows system. Basically, Resolve just uses the sort of default Windows system. And so I believe you're limited to 320. You can put the number higher, but it is not going to give you anything higher. And so for a 5.1 mix, 320 is a little bit low. Might even be like 256. It might show 320, but I think it might cap out at 256, which is really low for, for your actual bit rate. So linear PCM, and then you'll just have to, similar to one of my previous videos where I said, hey, output as a much higher quality file and then shrink it later. It's the same thing for the audio. You're going to want to just output the best possible audio and video, and then you have to unfortunately do sort of a second process where you compress everything after the fact. But that is just sort of your basics of that setup for, your bus. Again, think of bus as what is your channel setup output. So bus format could be stereo, just working with stereo, in this case 5.1, and then that sort of link group setup. Once you're ready to export, you get your channels labeled here so that you know what is what and what is where. And you can see now that I'm exporting, it's actually inputting that. It's putting in that information from the bus assignment. So again, here with the audio export, this is, what you want to select is your bus 1, which is basically saying export 5.1. Even if you had 12 tracks, it's still 5.1 if you set it up properly. 1 through 6 are one setup of 5.1, and then 7 through 12 are maybe a second 5.1 mix. They'll all come together on this bus. Basically, it is like just the output of those channels versus individual tracks. Otherwise, timeline tracks, all timeline tracks. For some reason, you are going to do mixing separately. Those are what those are for. But this output track is just your bus, essentially your output mix. So that kind of covers this. And if, people have suggestions for future videos, happy to answer them. As always, this is just my workflow. Other people are going to have different ways of doing it that may work better in certain situations. And that's great. Love to hear how people are accomplishing similar things in maybe other editing programs. If you have some recommendations for how people can accomplish this, please feel free to comment on that or ask other, follow-up clarifying questions. Hopefully, if people are finding this valuable, give a subscribe to the channel. We'll keep having sort of fan edit related releases and tutorials and other things as we go along. So see you guys on the next one.